I stood there, frozen, as the roar of diesel engines swallowed the quiet of the lake. My wife's dream home, our dream, was collapsing right in front of me. Beams cracked, glass shattered, and sawdust filled the air like ash from a funeral pyre. The woman responsible, the HOA president, stood 50 feet away in her pressed navy blazer, clipboard in hand, smiling while she checked off boxes like she was shopping for groceries. She thought she'd destroyed me. What she didn't know was that every inch of land beneath her high heels already belonged to me. My name's Sir Daniel Carter. And this story isn't about property lines or HOA fines. It's about how one woman's hunger for power pushed me to the edge, and how she learned, too late, that she'd been standing on ground I owned the entire time. 3 years ago, I thought I had life figured out. I'd just sold my tech startup for $42 million, enough to retire early and take care of my wife, Megan, who was battling stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Her last wish was simple: a home by the lake. We found the perfect spot: Ravenwood Valley, Colorado, quiet, stunning, tucked between pine forests and crystal water. We bought the land and started building. Megan used to sit in her wheelchair at the construction site, pointing out where she wanted the deck to face, where the sunlight hit the water best in the morning. She'd laugh when the wind tangled her hair and say, "Danny, promise me we'll grow old here." She passed away 3 months before we moved in. I finished the house alone, carrying her ashes in the wooden box she picked herself. For a while, that place kept me alive. The smell of pine, the morning fog, the sound of water against the dock. It was peace. Until she showed up. 2 weeks after I moved in, Barbara Whitmore, the HOA president, appeared at my front door like a tax collector from hell. "Mr. Carter," she said, clutching her clipboard, "your dock extends 12 inches beyond the approved length. That's a $150 violation." I told her, calmly, that the dock had been pre-approved by the previous board. She smiled that tight, soulless smile. "Previous approvals don't apply anymore. Standards evolve, and I enforce them." When I asked for the new rules in writing, the $150 became $847, labeled as an attitude adjustment fee. That's when I realized this wasn't about community standards. It was about control. Over the next weeks, I started hearing whispers from neighbors. A retired couple forced to sell after Barbara fined them for their oxygen tank being visible from the street. A widow made to rip out her husband's memorial garden. Families bullied into silence. The HOA wasn't protecting the neighborhood. It was terrorizing it. Then came the call from my bank. "Mr. Carter," the manager said, "we've received a lien on your property for unpaid HOA fees." I nearly dropped the phone. I hadn't missed a single payment. Barbara had held an emergency meeting while I was visiting my daughter in Denver, passed a motion with her inner circle to place a lien on my home. No notice, no due process, just pure corruption wrapped in paperwork. That night, I sat on my porch staring at the lake, trying to calm the rage boiling in my chest. For a moment, I actually wondered if I should just sell and leave, start fresh somewhere else. Then I looked at the little urn on the table beside me, the one holding Megan's ashes, and I heard her voice in my head. "Don't let anyone bully you out of what's yours, Danny." No, I wasn't leaving. I hired Patricia Gomez, a county real estate attorney with a reputation for tearing HOAs apart. She told me Barbara's lien was illegal. No notice, no proper quorum, no recorded minutes. She's banking on intimidation, Patricia said. Let's see how she handles sunlight. That's when I started digging. I discovered Barbara had been amending HOA rules without any board votes, just typing up her own updated standards and sending them out like commandments. The deeper we looked, the uglier it got. Fake expenses, fabricated safety inspections, missing funds. But she wasn't just corrupt. She was smart. When she realized I was pushing back, she went to war. Anonymous violation letters started arriving almost daily. Non-compliant landscaping, excessive lighting, unapproved outdoor furniture. I even got fined for my mailbox being aesthetically inconsistent. It was the same black box everyone else had. I felt trapped in some twisted reality show run by a power-hungry bureaucrat with nothing better to do. And yet, there were nights when I doubted myself. I'd stare at stacks of letters and think, what if she's right? What if I'm the problem? Maybe I just don't fit here. But the doubt never lasted long. I remembered the stories, the old widow crying over her destroyed garden, the retirees losing their home, and I realized I wasn't just fighting for me. I was fighting for everyone she'd crushed. That's when the resistance started. Tom, a quiet engineer whose parents Barbara had forced out. Maria, a single mom fined into debt over her fence. And old Mrs. Pike, the widow who'd lost her garden. We met in secret at the diner by the lake, building what we jokingly called the Ravenwood Underground. We gathered photos, letters, and records. Maria even took pictures of Barbara's friends' houses, all filled with violations that magically went unpunished. My daughter, Lena, an environmental lawyer, joined in. She spent weekends digging through state databases. One night she called me, voice tight with disbelief. Dad, she's using her ex-husband's old county connections to fake safety inspections. She's untouchable, on paper. But she wasn't untouchable anymore. Patricia subpoenaed the HOA's financial records, and what we found was gold. Tens of thousands of dollars for community improvements had gone straight into Barbara's personal property. The entrance gate renovation, that was her new wrought iron fence. The legal consulting fees, paid to a shell company registered to her own address. And yet, Barbara didn't back down. She doubled down. She sent a fake crew of utility workers to my house one morning. When they left, half my security cameras were dead, cables cut clean. Then came a restraining order, Barbara claiming I was stalking and harassing her with surveillance equipment. She called me dangerous, unstable. She told neighbors I was losing my mind from grief. That got to me. Because in my worst moments, I really had wondered if I was losing it. I'd wake at 2 a.m. to phantom noises outside, adrenaline surging. I was exhausted, angry, and grieving. And this woman, this smug tyrant with her clipboard, was gaslighting me into doubting my sanity. But that was her final mistake. Because when someone tries that hard to silence you, it's because they're terrified of what you might expose. Lena and I got to work. We installed hidden cameras, this time with encrypted cloud backups. We caught Barbara's men cutting wires, trespassing, vandalizing property. We recorded her voice on the phone instructing them to make it look like an accident. Every act of sabotage became another nail in her coffin. The final straw came one cold morning in October. I woke up to the thunder of diesel engines and saw demolition trucks rolling down my driveway. The sheriff's deputies were already there, blocking me from interfering. "Sir, there's a county order," one of them said. "Your house is a safety hazard." Barbara stood behind them, clipboard tight to her chest, beaming like she'd just won a war. I shouted that it was illegal, but the machines were already tearing through the walls. My wife's dream, our life, shattered, beam by beam. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, recording everything. Because we'd been expecting this. Lena had already tipped off federal investigators, and Patricia had reporters en route as the walls came down. The truth was going live across the internet, every camera streaming Barbara's victory in real time. By the time the dust settled, the EPA trucks were pulling in. Barbara's demolition had violated half a dozen environmental laws, but she didn't know that yet, not until that evening, when she strutted into the annual HOA meeting like a conquering queen. The room was packed. Neighbors, reporters, county officials. Barbara took the podium and said, "Today we took decisive action to protect our community from a dangerous, non-compliant homeowner." People clapped nervously. Then I stood up. "Before you move to ban me, Barbara," I said, "there's something everyone here deserves to know." I walked to the front, dropped a thick folder on the table, and nodded to Lena. She connected her laptop to the projector. Up came a county deed record with a familiar name. Carter Holdings, LLC. I looked straight at her. "Turns out, Barbara, every house in this valley, including yours, sits on my land. My company bought the entire 800-acre parcel 4 years ago. You've been fining, threatening, and demolishing homes on property that doesn't legally belong to your HOA. You're a tenant. I'm your landlord." The room went silent. Cameras flashed. Barbara's face drained of color. She stammered, That's impossible." Lena cut her off. "The EPA is opening an investigation into your illegal demolition, and the state attorney's office," she said, holding up a second document, "has already filed charges for fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering." Then the double doors opened, and 2 U.S. Marshals walked in. One of them, a woman with a badge shining under the fluorescent lights, stepped forward. "Barbara Whitmore," she said clearly, "you're under arrest." The click of handcuffs echoed through the hall like thunder after a storm. Barbara's clipboard hit the floor, scattering her precious violation notices across the room. Her inner circle shrank in their seats as she was led away. Eyes wide, trembling, powerless. I turned to the crowd. "Effective immediately," I said. "The HOA as you know it is dissolved. From now on, this community will run transparently, by the residents, for the residents. No cheers, no applause, just a long, heavy silence, and then the sound of relief. Quiet, but real. Spreading through the room like the first breeze after a long storm. Outside, the air smelled of pine and wet dirt, the lake glinting silver under the moonlight. I stood there for a moment, watching the lights fade in the windows, and felt the weight of it all lift off my chest. Barbara thought she could bury me under paperwork and lies. She thought she could destroy what my wife and I built. Instead, she handed me every piece I needed to bring her down. And that's the thing about people like her. They think power means control. But real power is knowing when to stand your ground.